Ethan Rodriguez had been planning this trip for 6 months. A 3-day hiking expedition through the Cascade Mountains in Washington state, 40 miles of wilderness, 3 high mountain passes, alpine lakes, and the kind of solitude that came from being completely disconnected from civilization. He'd mapped every route, researched every trailhead, calculated every water source and potential camping spot. He'd been planning it as a solo journey, something he did every year since coming out 8 years ago. These solo trips had become his spiritual practice, his way of reconnecting with himself, his method of processing whatever complications his life was currently containing. But then his best friend Marcus had asked to join him. "I need this," Marcus had said over coffee 3 months ago, looking worn out in a way that suggested his life was imploding. His marriage to Claire was failing, something that had become increasingly obvious over the past year as Marcus's enthusiasm for couple activities had evaporated and his wife had stopped coming to their regular friend group gatherings. 3 days in the wilderness? Ethan had asked carefully, already knowing what the answer would be. 3 days of not having to think, Marcus had confirmed. 3 days of being outside my head. 3 days with someone who actually sees me. So Ethan had said yes. And now they were standing at the trailhead at 6 a.m. on a Friday morning, loading up their backpacks, preparing for 3 days in the mountains together. Marcus looked good outdoors. That was the first real thought Ethan allowed himself to have, and then he immediately repressed it. Marcus was his best friend. Marcus was straight. Marcus was in the middle of a marital crisis. None of those facts were new, but something about being alone in the wilderness with Marcus made them feel more significant than usual. "I can't believe we're actually doing this," Marcus said, adjusting the straps on his backpack. "I've been stuck in Seattle for so long, I forgot that places like this existed." Marcus was 33 years old, with warm brown skin, dark hair that was beginning to show gray at the temples, and eyes that seemed to contain infinite sadness lately. He worked in tech, something in product management for a startup. He had a golden retriever named Cooper and a house in a trendy neighborhood and a marriage that was slowly dissolving. Ethan was 34 years old with similar coloring to Marcus, but a completely different life trajectory. Ethan worked as a landscape architect. He'd come out as gay at 26, had processed his family's initial complications, and had built a life that was authentically his own. He had a studio apartment, a deep circle of chosen family, and a level of emotional freedom that Marcus seemed to be desperately seeking. 3 days, Ethan said, checking his backpack one more time. No cell service, no emails, no responsibilities except getting ourselves to camp every night and not dying. "I can do that," Marcus said, and he smiled in a way that suggested he was genuinely grateful to be here. They started hiking at 6:30 a.m., and for the first hour, everything felt normal. They talked about their lives, Ethan updating Marcus on the landscape design project he was working on, Marcus describing the specific dysfunction of his startup's management structure. They fell into the familiar rhythms of their friendship, the kind of easy conversation that came from knowing someone for 15 years. They'd met in college, had been roommates junior year, had remained close through various life transitions. Marcus had been Ethan's best friend when Ethan was navigating his coming out process. Ethan had been Marcus's best friend when Marcus was falling in love with Claire, when Marcus was getting married, when Marcus's marriage was slowly becoming more about proximity than genuine connection. But there was something different about being alone with Marcus in the wilderness. Something about the isolation and the physical exertion and the way that the mountains seemed to strip away the comfortable performances that everyday life required. By mile 7, they'd stopped for lunch at a beautiful meadow with a view of the peaks they'd be hiking through. They sat on a log and ate sandwiches, and Marcus said something that Ethan had been trying not to think about. "I think I'm going to divorce Claire," Marcus said quietly. "I don't think I'm in love with her anymore. I don't think I've been in love with her for years." Ethan felt something complicated move through him, concern for his friend, but also something else that he immediately tried to suppress. "Have you told her that?" Ethan asked carefully. "No," Marcus said. "That's part of why I needed to come out here. I need to figure out who I am without her before I figure out what comes next." "That makes sense," Ethan said, which was true, even though it didn't feel like the complete truth of what Ethan was experiencing. "I think I've been performing in my marriage," Marcus continued. playing the role of happy husband when really I was just going through the motions. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of pretending that I'm okay when I'm not. I'm tired of being invisible in my own life." Ethan heard the echo of his own coming out journey in Marcus's words. Marcus was just beginning to understand what Ethan had already learned years ago, that visibility was more valuable than comfort, that authenticity required vulnerability, that sometimes the people you loved most weren't compatible with who you actually were. "You're not invisible," Ethan said to his friend. "You're just learning to be seen." Marcus looked at Ethan for a long moment, and there was something in that look that made Ethan's breath catch. But before anything could be communicated, Marcus looked away, back toward the mountains they'd be climbing. "Come on," Marcus said, standing up. "If we want to make base camp before dark, we need to keep moving." They continued hiking, and Ethan found himself hyper-aware of Marcus in a way that he'd been able to manage in regular life. Out here, with nothing but the sound of their footsteps and the wilderness surrounding them, Ethan couldn't perform the role of Marcus's best friend quite as convincingly. He kept noticing things. The way Marcus moved through the landscape, the strength in his body, the vulnerability in his voice when he talked about his marriage. By the time they reached base camp that evening, Ethan was both exhausted and more awake than he'd been in years. They set up their tents, two separate shelters positioned at a respectful distance from each other. They cooked dinner on a camp stove, talked about the next day's hike, maintained all the surface-level mechanics of the friendship while something deeper and more complicated began to shift beneath. As Ethan was lying in his tent that night, listening to the sounds of the wilderness, he allowed himself to acknowledge the truth that he'd been dancing around. He was attracted to Marcus. Not in a casual, incidental way, but in a way that felt dangerous and complicated and absolutely not actionable. Marcus was straight. Marcus was married, for now. Marcus was his best friend. All three of those facts made this attraction feel like a problem instead of a possibility. Ethan lay in the darkness and decided to compartmentalize. He could manage this. He could spend 3 days with Marcus in the mountains, could be supportive as Marcus navigated his marital crisis, could maintain the friendship that mattered more than any attraction could. It would be fine. They would hike, they would talk, and they would return to normal life relatively unchanged. Ethan had no idea how wrong that assumption would prove to be. Day 2 of the expedition dawned cold and clear. The route for the day was 18 miles with a 3,000-foot elevation gain. It was ambitious, but Ethan had done it before, and Marcus was in decent shape. Ethan calculated they could make it to the next camp before sunset. What Ethan hadn't calculated was how intimate the day would become. By mile 5, Marcus had stopped talking about his marriage. Instead, he was asking Ethan questions about his life, genuine, deep questions that suggested Marcus was actually trying to understand who Ethan was beyond the role of best friend who listens to my problems. "When did you know for sure?" Marcus asked as they were walking through a dense forest. "When did you know that you were gay?" Ethan had told this story to many people over the years, but there was something about being in the wilderness with Marcus, something about the enforced intimacy of the shared journey that made him tell the truth more completely than usual. "I think I always knew," Ethan said, "but I didn't have language for it until college. And I didn't have the courage to act on it until I was 26. "What changed?" Marcus asked. "I met someone," Ethan said. "Another guy in a landscape architecture program. He was so completely comfortable with who he was, and I was so completely not comfortable with who I was. And I realized that spending my whole life hiding wasn't actually safer than being visible. It was just a different kind of dangerous." "Did you and this guy ever?" Marcus didn't finish the question, but the implication hung in the air. "Yeah," Ethan said. "For a while. But we wanted different things, so it ended. But he gave me the gift of not having to hide anymore. And I've never regretted the decision to come out, even though it was hard." They walked in silence for a while. Then Marcus said, "I think I've been hiding too, just in a different way. I've been hiding in a marriage that isn't working. I've been hiding in a job that exhausts me. I've been hiding in this version of myself that I created because it seemed like the right path." "So what do you actually want?" Ethan asked carefully. "I don't know," Marcus said, and there was genuine vulnerability in his voice. That's what terrifies me. I've spent so much time being who I thought I should be that I don't even know who I actually am anymore. By mile 12, Marcus had slowed down significantly. Not because of the physical exertion, he was handling the hiking well, but because something emotional had shifted. Marcus was processing, was moving through something internal that required all his attention. They stopped for a break at a mountain lake, and Marcus sat down on a rock, looking completely vulnerable in a way that Ethan had rarely seen from him. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "And I need you to just answer honestly, without judgment." "Of course," Ethan replied. "Have you ever felt like you were living the wrong life? Like you made all the right decisions for the wrong reasons, and now you're stuck with a life that looks good from the outside but feels empty from the inside?" Ethan sat down next to Marcus. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes. But some people spend their entire lives avoiding that feeling instead of investigating it." "I think I'm one of those people," Marcus said. "I think I married Claire because it was the next logical step. I think I took the job because it paid well. I think I built this whole life as if I was playing a video game on someone else's settings." "So change it," Ethan said gently. "It's not that simple," Marcus said. "There's so much infrastructure built on these decisions. A mortgage, a marriage, a career trajectory. A life that other people depend on." "Does Claire depend on you being her husband?" Ethan asked. "Or does she depend on you being happy?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think if I'm not happy, I'm not actually present with her anyway. So maybe the kindest thing I can do for her is to figure out what would make me happy and see if she can be part of that." They reached the next campsite around 6 p.m., and as they were setting up their tents and preparing dinner, something shifted in the dynamic between them. It wasn't dramatic or obvious. It was subtle, a series of small moments that added up to something significant. Marcus's hand brushing against Ethan's as they worked around the camp stove. Marcus sitting closer to Ethan than necessary as they ate dinner. Marcus maintaining eye contact for slightly longer than usual when they were talking. Or maybe Ethan was imagining it. Maybe he was projecting his own attraction onto innocent moments and seeing connection where there was only friendship. After dinner, they sat by the fire, and Marcus said, "I need to ask you something else." "Okay," Ethan said, bracing himself. "Do you think I'm a coward?" Marcus asked. "For staying in a marriage I'm not happy in? For not being brave enough to actually make a change?" "No," Ethan said. "I think you're human. I think you're trying to honor the commitments you've made while also honoring your own needs. That's not cowardice. That's complexity." "How did you do it?" Marcus asked. "How did you find the courage to come out? How did you decide that being authentic was worth the risk?" Ethan thought about this carefully. "I realized that I was dying slowly by hiding. That the fear of other people's judgment was killing me faster than the judgment itself ever could. And I decided that a short, authentic life was better than a lone, performed one." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think I might be gay." The world seemed to stop. Ethan couldn't move, couldn't speak, couldn't breathe properly. "Or at least," Marcus continued, "I think I might not be entirely straight. I think there might be something in me that I'd been suppressing because it didn't fit into the life I thought I was supposed to have." "Okay," Ethan said, choosing his words very carefully. "That's a significant realization." "I know," Marcus said. "And I'm terrified. And I have no idea what that means or what I'm supposed to do about it. But I think it's part of why my marriage is failing. I think I've been trying to be someone I'm not, and Claire could feel that fundamental wrongness even if I couldn't." "How did you come to this realization?" Ethan asked. "Being here with you," Marcus said simply. "Seeing how comfortable you are with who you are. Seeing how at peace you seem when you're being authentic. And then recognizing that I don't have that peace. And then trying to understand why." Ethan felt something dangerous bloom inside him, hope, possibility, the specific terror of wanting something that might actually be within reach. "What are you going to do?" Ethan asked. I don't know, Marcus said. I need to go home and figure things out with Claire. I need to be honest with her about where I am. And I need to give myself permission to explore this part of myself that I've been hiding. What does that exploration look like? Ethan asked, and his voice sounded strange even to himself. I'm not sure yet, Marcus said. But I know that it starts with being honest with myself and with other people. Marcus looked at Ethan directly, and there was something in that look that suggested Marcus understood exactly what Ethan was feeling. Thank you, Marcus said. For bringing me out here. For pushing me to be honest. For modeling what it looks like to actually be yourself. Of course, Ethan replied. But as he went to bed that night, Ethan understood that something fundamental had changed. Marcus had just come out as potentially non-straight. Marcus had just revealed that he was questioning his sexuality. And Ethan, after spending 15 years hiding his attraction to his best friend, suddenly had to recalibrate everything. This had become exponentially more complicated and exponentially more possible. Day 3 was the final stretch, a 12-mile descent back to the trailhead where they had started. Ethan had barely slept. He'd spent the night replaying Marcus's revelation, analyzing every word, trying to understand what Marcus was actually saying versus what Ethan was hoping Marcus was saying. The hike that morning started in silence. Both men seemed to be processing, seemed to understand that something needed to shift in the dynamic, but neither of them quite knew how to navigate that shift. By mile 5, Marcus said, I know I dropped a lot on you last night. It's okay, Ethan replied. You're processing something that's been building for a long time. I think I've been attracted to you, Marcus said suddenly, as if the words had been pushed out of him against his will. 4 years. But I'd been hiding it under the category of friendship and best friend devotion. And I didn't want to ruin what we have by making it into something else. Ethan felt his heart rate increase dramatically. What are you saying? I'm saying that I think I might have feelings for you that go beyond friendship, Marcus said. And I have no idea if you feel the same way. They had stopped walking. They were standing on the trail, surrounded by mountains and wilderness and the specific isolation that comes from being completely alone. I have feelings for you too, Ethan said, and the admission felt like stepping off a cliff. Yeah? Marcus asked, and there was hope in his voice. Yeah, Ethan confirmed. I've had feelings for you for years. Since probably 10 minutes after we met in college. But I accepted that you were straight, that you were my best friend, and that acting on those feelings would destroy the most important relationship in my life. And now? Marcus asked. Now I don't know, Ethan said honestly. Now you're telling me you're questioning your sexuality, which changes everything and nothing simultaneously. Now you're telling me you have feelings for me, which is something I fantasized about but never actually believed would be true. Now you're in the middle of a marriage that's failing, which seems like maybe not the ideal time to act on any of this. I know, Marcus said. I know the timing is terrible. I know I'm a mess. I know I've got to figure out my marriage and my sexuality and my entire life. But I also know that I can't pretend I don't feel this anymore. I can't go back to just being your best friend and ignoring the fact that I want more. What do you want? Ethan asked, even though he was terrified of the answer. I want to try, Marcus said. I want to see if this could actually be something. Not necessarily right now, but eventually. After I've dealt with Claire and figured out who I am. But I want to know if there's potential here. There's definitely potential, Ethan said, and he was shaking as he said it. Marcus moved closer, and Ethan found himself unable to move away. They were standing very close, and the air between them felt charged with possibility. Can I ask you to do something? Marcus said. What? Can I kiss you? Marcus asked. Just once, so I know if this feeling is real or if I've just been romanticizing you in my head. Ethan nodded, unable to form words. When Marcus kissed him, it was gentle and careful and completely real. It was the moment Ethan had fantasized about for 15 years. And it was also the complication Ethan had been dreading, because this wasn't just attraction anymore. This was genuine connection. This was possibility. When they broke apart, Marcus said, "It's real." "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "It's real." They stood there for a moment, hands still connected, trying to process what had just happened. "I need to go home and handle things with Claire," Marcus said finally. "I need to be honest with her about where I am. I need to figure out what comes next for us." "I know," Ethan said. "But I want you to know that I'm going to do this," Marcus said. "I'm going to end the marriage. I'm going to figure out my sexuality. And I'm going to figure out if we can actually build something together." "Marcus," Ethan said carefully, "I need you to be clear about something. I need you to do these things because they're right for you, not because you think it's what I want. I can't be the reason you make these decisions. That's too much pressure, and it's not fair to either of us." "I know that," Marcus said. "I'm doing this because I need to. Because I can't pretend to be someone I'm not anymore. And if it turns out that you and I aren't compatible, that's okay. But I have to at least try to be authentic." They finished the final miles of the hike in a state of careful processing. The physical exertion seemed to help. It gave them something to focus on besides the emotional complexity of what had just happened. By the time they reached the trailhead, they had established some parameters. 1. Marcus would go home and have an honest conversation with Claire about where he was emotionally and psychologically. 2. Marcus would give himself time to process his sexuality without pressure or timeline. 3. Ethan and Marcus would maintain their friendship, but would acknowledge the romantic feelings that existed between them. 4. They would not act on those feelings until Marcus had actually separated from his marriage, giving Claire and himself the space to make clear decisions. 5. They would remain open to the possibility that this could be something real, but also open to the possibility that it might not work out, and that would be okay. As they were driving back to Seattle, Marcus reached over and took Ethan's hand. "Thank you," Marcus said. "For being patient. For being honest. For being willing to take this risk with me." "Of course," Ethan said. But as he drove through the Seattle traffic toward his apartment, Ethan understood that his life had fundamentally changed. He'd spent 15 years protecting his heart by keeping his attraction to Marcus compartmentalized and manageable. Now, that compartmentalization had exploded, and he had no idea how he was supposed to put it back together. All he knew was that Marcus was going to go home and make some significant life changes, and Ethan was going to spend the next weeks and months waiting to see if those changes would eventually create space for them to build something real together. It was terrifying. It was also the most hopeful Ethan had felt in years. Marcus went home on Sunday evening and told Claire everything. Ethan didn't witness this conversation, but Marcus called him afterward, voice shaking with the particular exhaustion of truth-telling. "She knew," Marcus said without preamble. "She said she's known for years that something was wrong, but she kept hoping I would figure it out and fix it. She said she'd rather I be honest than keep pretending." "How did she take the rest of it?" Ethan asked carefully. "The sexuality stuff?" "Better than I expected," Marcus said. "She said it actually explained a lot. She said she always felt like I was somewhere else emotionally, and now she understands why." "And the Ethan part?" Ethan asked, even though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "I didn't tell her about you specifically," Marcus said. "I just said that I had feelings for someone else. She asked if it was you, and I said yes. And she said she wasn't surprised because she's always noticed how I look at you." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "We've been that obvious?" "Apparently," Marcus said with a slight laugh. "She said it's been obvious to everyone except maybe us." Over the following weeks, Marcus and Claire began the process of separation. It was amicable, which meant it was complicated and sad in ways that dramatic fights might have avoided. They loved each other, just not in the way that marriage required. They had built a life together, just not one that either of them actually wanted to continue living. Marcus moved into a small apartment in Capitol Hill, not far from Ethan's place. And for the first time in years, Marcus was actually available. But Ethan was also terrified. For 15 years, the unattainability of Marcus had been the structure that allowed Ethan to maintain his attraction without having to do anything about it. Now that Marcus was available, now that he'd come out as questioning his sexuality, now that he'd explicitly expressed romantic interest in Ethan, everything felt real and possible and absolutely terrifying. They started spending more time together. They went to dinner, went to movies, went to the park. But they didn't touch beyond friendly hugs. They didn't discuss the kiss on the mountain. They existed in this careful space where they acknowledged the romantic feelings but didn't act on them. 3 weeks into Marcus's separation, they were sitting in Ethan's living room and Marcus said, "I think I'm actually gay." Not just questioning. "What makes you say that?" Ethan asked. "Because I'm not attracted to women," Marcus said. "I mean, I was attracted to Claire at some point, but I think I mistook emotional connection for romantic attraction. And now that I'm being honest about who I am, I realize that I don't have sexual attraction to women. I only have it for men." "How does that feel?" Ethan asked. "Liberating," Marcus said. "And terrifying and amazing all at once." Marcus had also started going to therapy. He was processing his marriage, his sexuality, his identity, all the things that he'd been avoiding for years. And he seemed genuinely committed to figuring out who he actually was. But the progress he was making on his own journey was creating a complicated dynamic with Ethan. The more Marcus seemed to be healing and integrating his authentic self, the more Ethan felt the pull to be with him romantically. And the more Ethan felt that pull, the more he tried to suppress it, because he didn't want to be the reason Marcus made any decisions. By week 4, Ethan was struggling with the tension. "We need to talk about this," Ethan said one evening as they were cooking dinner together in his apartment. "About what?" Marcus asked, though he clearly knew what Ethan was talking about. "About us," Ethan said. "About what happened on the mountain. About the fact that you're getting divorced and coming out as gay, and we're both pretending like we're not sitting on top of a massive amount of unprocessed romantic and sexual tension." "I'm not pretending," Marcus said. "I'm just trying to be careful. I'm trying not to rush into something new while I'm still processing the ending of something old." "I understand that," Ethan said. "But I also think we need to actually address what's happening between us instead of just ignoring it." "What do you want?" Marcus asked. "I want to know if you actually want to try this," Ethan said. "Or if I'm just convenient right now because you're going through a transition. Because I can't do casual with you. I can't do this if it's just a sexual experimentation phase for you. This has been real for me for too long to settle for something less than complete." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I want to try. Not right now, but soon. But I also need you to understand that I'm still figuring myself out. I don't have all the answers about who I am yet." "I don't need you to have all the answers," Ethan said. "I just need you to be honest about what you're capable of and what you actually want." "I want you," Marcus said simply. "I don't know exactly what that looks like yet, but I want to find out." That night, they allowed themselves to kiss again. Not the careful exploratory kiss from the mountain, but something deeper and more intentional. And it was everything Ethan had imagined and also absolutely terrifying, because it was real and could actually become something. Over the next month, Marcus and Ethan gradually began dating. It was strange because they'd been best friends for 15 years, but now they were exploring each other in ways that friendship had never allowed. They discovered that they had chemistry that went far beyond emotional connection. They discovered that they made each other laugh in new ways. They discovered that being intimate was both familiar and completely new. But they also moved slowly. Ethan wanted Marcus to have time to process his coming out and his divorce. Marcus wanted to make sure that he wasn't just using Ethan as a rebound or as a way to escape his feelings about Claire. Around week 8, Marcus came out to his family. His parents had been loving and supportive, though they needed time to process. His sister had been enthusiastically supportive and had immediately started asking when she could meet Ethan. Ethan met Marcus's parents for the first time at a casual dinner, and it was strange and wonderful to be introduced as Marcus's boyfriend instead of Marcus's best friend. It was strange to have his relationship acknowledged and validated in ways that his previous relationships with men hadn't been, because those relationships had always existed in shadows. Marcus's mother pulled Ethan aside at one point and said, "Thank you for being patient with my son while he figured out who he was." "He didn't need me to be patient," Ethan replied. "He just needed to be allowed to be authentic." Still, Marcus's mother said, "You clearly care about him, and that matters." By week 12, 3 months after the mountain adventure, Marcus moved in with Ethan. It was a big step, and they both understood it as such. But Marcus's apartment lease was up, and staying separate felt artificial when they were already spending all their time together anyway. Moving in together brought new challenges. They had to negotiate bathroom time and kitchen space and the daily realities of shared domestic life. They had to learn each other's patterns and rhythms in ways that friendship had never required. But they also discovered that they actually liked living together. They discovered that they made each other better. They discovered that what they had built on the mountain wasn't just a moment of connection, it was the foundation of something real and sustainable. 3 months into living together, Ethan's mother called with a request. "I'd like to meet your boyfriend," she said, which was a sentence that Ethan had never expected to hear from his mother without judgment in her voice. Ethan arranged a dinner at his parents' house. He was nervous. Even though his parents had been supportive of his coming out years ago, there was something different about introducing a partner to your family. It made your relationship real in a way that other acknowledgments didn't. But the dinner went well. Ethan's parents liked Marcus. They asked thoughtful questions. They made it clear that they welcomed Marcus into the family. And by the end of the evening, Ethan's mother had pulled him aside and said, "He looks at you the way your father looks at me, like you're the most important thing in his life." After they left his parents' house, Ethan said to Marcus, "I think my mom approves of you. Do you approve of me?" Marcus asked, and there was something vulnerable in the question. "Completely," Ethan said. "I've approved of you since that first night in college. That hasn't changed. If anything, I approve of you more now that you're being authentic." By month 5, Marcus had officially come out publicly. He'd posted on social media, told his colleagues at work, integrated his authentic self into all aspects of his life, not just the relationship with Ethan. And in doing so, he'd become more fully himself than Ethan had ever seen him be. 6 months after the mountain adventure, Ethan and Marcus were sitting on their apartment balcony, watching the Seattle sunset. "I want to ask you something," Marcus said. "And I need you to know that I'm ready for whatever answer you give." Ethan felt his heart rate increase. "Okay. I want to propose," Marcus said. "Not right now, but eventually. I want to marry you. I want to build a legal life with you. I want to stand up in front of people and say that you're my forever person." Ethan felt tears start to form. "I know it's fast," Marcus continued. "I know I've only been out for 6 months. I know I've only been with you for 6 months." "Yes," Ethan said. "Whatever you're asking, the answer is yes." "I'm not asking yet," Marcus said with a smile. "I'm just telling you what I want. So you have time to get used to the idea." But Ethan was already used to the idea. He'd been fantasizing about this scenario for 15 years. The fantasy was finally becoming reality. Over the following months, Ethan and Marcus built their life together. They renovated their apartment. They got a dog, a golden retriever mix named Scout. They started discussing long-term plans, where they wanted to live eventually, whether they wanted to have children, how they wanted to build their future. Marcus's divorce from Claire was finalized amicably. They remained friends, which Ethan appreciated because it showed that Marcus's love for Claire had been real, even if it hadn't been the right kind of love to build a marriage on. 1 year after the mountain adventure, Marcus proposed. He did it on the same mountain trail where they'd had their first real conversation about Marcus's sexuality. He got down on one knee at the summit, with the same view that had witnessed their transformation. And Ethan said yes without hesitation. They planned a small wedding for the following fall. Just close family and friends, a celebration of their commitment in an environment that felt meaningful to both of them. As Ethan was preparing for the wedding, he reflected on how much had changed in a year. A year ago, Marcus had been a man struggling with inauthenticity, trying to hide his sexuality behind a marriage that wasn't working. Ethan had been a man who'd resigned himself to never being able to have the person he loved. Now they were getting married. It seemed impossible and also absolutely inevitable. All it had taken was a mountain adventure, some vulnerability, and the willingness to be honest about what they actually wanted.